Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figure that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. It's also a new year. Welcome to 2026. What a fantabulous time to be alive. The year of our Lord 2026. 2025 is actually a pretty good year. I know I could have done a show on New Year's Eve, and I thought about it. I really did. And then I was like, family time. But I looked back on 2025. I put together an amalgamation, a collage of photos from the year. And I don't know if you guys do this. You can let me know in the comments below over on YouTube, Facebook, and X. Remember, if you're on X/Twitter, you have to click the video first, go into old Periscope mode, and then if you comment, it'll pop up in the comment section of the show, including on the screen, like boom, bottom right side of your screen. Now, I don't know if anybody else is like this, but I tend to like the idea of putting something out there of the year in review, like one picture per month. And then I realized that with 4 kids, it's really hard to only do one picture per month. And then I realized that 2025 was a lot more stacked than I can remember. We had a lot of things going on in this family last year. We had a lot of different things, and I had a lot going on with work, right? So for those of you who were on the ride last year, now it's last year, there were multiple times in New York. It was Boston, Florida, was it Fort Lauderdale, Las Vegas, Toronto. This year, it looks like a lot of those places are lining up again. And I go off to Europe in a little bit, where we'll be doing the show from Vienna and we'll be doing the show from Barcelona. And we'll see how that goes. I don't think I'm going to do it from the airport in Frankfurt, but I might. I think it's probably unlikely, but I think Vienna and Barcelona will happen, and we'll see what the hell that's going to look like. So it's going to be an interesting year. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to spending time with each and every one of you. We are on our push to 2,000 subscribers on the channel. We're getting there slowly but surely. And I say slowly, it's really not that slow. I mean, it's a handful a day. And I think at some point here in the year 2026, we'll get to 2,000. I thought about doing a giveaway. I came really close. And then I was like, I don't know, do I need to? So I guess you can let me know in the comments if you're one of the people who've been tuning into this show for the better part of a year and a half, and you haven't subscribed yet, and what it'll take to get you over that hump is a giveaway. I guess let me know. But I think for the most part, we are just kind of rolling along here, and this channel continues to grow, and the podcast feed continues to grow, and the channels over on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Facebook continue to grow, so it's very cool. Now, when we had last year, when I think back about it from a sports perspective, there were some positives, right? And I think that if I had done a retrospective show on New Year's Eve, obviously the biggest highlight of the year would have been the Eagles winning the Super Bowl. That clearly is the number one sports memory of the year in Philadelphia. And then you start to try to piece together, were there big moments across the board for each of the teams? So I'm going to touch on that really, really quick, and then we're going to get into 2026 and a lot of what's going on right now with the Flyers, with the Sixers, with the Eagles, and even with the Philadelphia Union. Maybe we'll touch very briefly on something that's not happening with the Philadelphia Phillies. So really quick, if you think back to last year, the biggest development for the Philadelphia 76ers was probably the massive leap in performance of Tyrese Maxey, who looked like at the end of the 24-25 season was going to be a budding superstar. And the back half of the year, we got to see Tyrese Maxey really become a superstar guard, somebody who will be, if this continues, absolutely worthy of MVP votes, could potentially push for an all-NBA first team spot. But man, if you didn't walk away from 2025 thinking to yourself, VJ Edgecombe might be the best player in his draft class, I don't know what to tell you. Now, I think Dylan Harper looks like a really, really good player, and he might ultimately be the best player. I think Cooper Flagg was the most NBA ready, and I don't actually know what Cooper Flagg's top ceiling is going to be as a player. I think he's going to be a very, very good, perennial all-star. Will he go down as one of the all-time greats or one of the greats of his generation? I'm not so sure. But man, VJ Edgecombe looks like a star, and we're going to get back to him in a little bit when we talk about the Sixers and their performance against Dallas. If you go to the Flyers, I think the biggest thing that you come away from last year with was the dismissal of Tortorella, the hiring of Tocchet, and what that meant for that franchise going forward. I would argue that the Porter Martone draft pick is probably the most significant move that happened for the Flyers a year ago, not because it had immediate dividends. It paid immediate dividends last year. It didn't. but he ends up going to Michigan State, where he's played exceptionally well. He's now the captain of the World Juniors Team Canada. You also made a ballsy move at the end of that first round to move up and get Jack Nesbitt, who many consider to be a prospect, but man, if he puts it together, it's a hell of a pick as a second first rounder in that draft. And then, of course, you look at the trade for Trevor Zegras and what that could ultimately mean for this team. So you put all those things together, and man, 2025 ended better for the Flyers than I think it started in the beginning of 2025. We could also talk about the fact that Dan Vladar looks like a number one goalie. We could also talk about the fact that Alexei Kolosov and Carson Bjarnason look good with the Phantoms. Sam Ersson looks horrific, and we'll get to that in a bit as well. But like on the whole, if you look at the position groups, and then if you look at the prospects in the pipeline, the Flyers ended 2025 in a stronger place than they did going into it. The same can be said for the Sixers, a better team at the end of 2025 than entering the year 2025. And then we have to talk about the Phillies. The Phillies, I think, are in a decline. And I don't have a nice way to say it. And I remain very skeptical of this team, this management, and unfortunately ownership as well, because I'm starting to wonder if that much rumored cap, right, that budget restriction that may be put into place by John Middleton, I'm starting to think that there might actually be something to it, because the Phillies lost out on Amai. It seems as though Ranger Suarez is going to probably pursue a bigger contract in greener pastures elsewhere. They brought back Kyle Schwarber. JT Realmuto remains unsigned. They brought in Adolis Garcia. They're trying desperately to get rid of Nick Castellanos. It doesn't look like they're getting rid of Alec Boehm anytime soon. The most exciting things out there are, could they go after Bo Bichette? Could they go after Alex Bregman? But man, you have to be fair here. Andrew Painter didn't do a lot to inspire confidence in the minors last year. So if he's just going to be given a spot on this roster, you question things. If this outfield lineup is going to, replace Harrison Bader with Nick Castellanos, with Justin Crawford, who they didn't feel confident enough to bring up at any point last year, along with their Adolis Garcia, I'm not sure that's a huge upgrade. I'd say that the lineup is mostly unchanged, not a huge upgrade there. The bullpen did get better, right? The Juan Duran, I think, acquisition is probably the biggest move of the year if you're looking for a positive for the Phillies, because it wasn't just for that stretch run into the playoffs. It was beyond that. He was under contract beyond that season. So I'd say the Duran trade is probably the biggest, most consequential thing. But we once again saw the Phillies come up small in the playoffs. We saw them underwhelm. And yes, it was against a Dodgers team that was an absolute buzzsaw. And so we don't want to be unfair here, make it sound like the Phillies lost to an inferior team. But they once again came up short and did not get the job done, did not get back to a World Series. And we ended 2025 with Bryce Harper posting a picture of himself wearing a shirt in a batting cage that said "not elite" very clearly, just like looking to, I guess, needle the words of Dave Dombrowski saying that Harper didn't have an elite season, which he did not. I don't know. Is that going to be motivation? Are we going to see Bryce Harper return to MVP form? I'm not so sure that we will. Can he be an all-star player? I think he can be. He probably should be. But I left 2025 feeling worse about the Phillies than I did entering 2025. So they are one team that I definitely feel like has taken a step back. The last team is Philadelphia Union, who, man, were it not for the fact that Ernst Tanner ended the season and in the playoffs under investigation by Major League Soccer for the second time in a very short span of time for misogynistic, homophobic, and racist comments, allegedly, I would feel pretty good about the Union, but they are in the process of churning over this line again. They had some big departures last season, and they followed that up by winning the Supporter Shield. But now in the last few weeks, we've seen them move on from Ty Baribo to DC United. We've seen Jacob Glesnes leave, and now Kai Wagner is very close to leaving for Birmingham. And yes, they're backfilling those positions. And yes, I trust Ernst Tanner, but if he really has nothing to do with these moves, I'm very concerned. It's a team that has been able to make this Moneyball thing work, but I think a lot of that is just the intelligence and the savviness of Ernst Tanner. I'm not sure that if you replace him with someone else, they're going to be able to work under these very tight financial restraints, but that is kind of where the Union are at. So listen, going into 2025, I think there were very fair questions. I actively called out the fact that I thought ownership was cheap again, and that some of the moves that they decided to make could come back to burn them. I was wrong. Moving on from Jim Curtin and bringing in Bradley Carnell, it worked out really well. He was a fantastic addition, right, to that bench. He was a very good manager for this team. And I think ultimately the future is bright there as long as Ernst Tanner remains. If this investigation continues and Tanner is ultimately removed, well, then I don't feel as great about the union. So I'm in like a weird kind of iffy spot with the union. I will continue to trust in Ernst Tanner until it's proven otherwise that I shouldn't. So I'm going to leave the Philadelphia Union in a very neutral place going into 2026. So to recap, Eagles won a Super Bowl. I think that we'll get to this in a little bit. I think the Eagles, despite the fact that things have gone to absolute hell in a handbasket on the offensive side of the ball under Kevin Patullo and a very injured offensive line that is just not doing the job appropriately, there are signs to me that this Eagles team can and probably will go on a deep playoff run. Could they make it back to a Super Bowl? Can they win another Super Bowl? I feel good about the Eagles. I would still say that the Eagles end 2025 in a better place than they entered it. I would say that the Sixers end 2025 and enter 2026 in a better place than when they entered 2025. The Flyers on the whole are better leaving 2025 than they were entering. The Phillies are worse off exiting 2025, entering 2026. And the Union are pretty much status quo exiting 2025 and entering into 2026. So you guys can let me know if that's fair. Is it unfair? I'll get out to the comments here in a bit because I see a bunch of people have been dropping some stuff in there. But let me know what you think. Give me your ups, your downs, your in-betweens for each of those teams. If there's a team that, you don't follow or you don't have a thought on, just give me like the NA, right? The not applicable thing. But give me your thumbs up, your thumbs down, and your not applicables, or you're in the middle. I want to know where you guys are at on the Sixers, the Flyers, the Phillies, the Eagles, the Union. Let me know. And if there's a team I missed, I probably don't consider them to be a team. Sorry. All right, let's go out real quick to the comments, and then we're going to get into Eagles, Flyers, and Sixers today. There's a lot to get into, even though the fact that it is a Friday, it's only the second day of the calendar year. We're going to get into all of it because there is a lot to get to today. Amadeo says, tired of playoff Risto? Time for Olympic Risto. Get there in a bit. Greg Bondarenko with a good afternoon. Happy Friday. Nick Abe says, I looked at the Flyers schedule and said, shit, we'll get there as well. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko says, I'm not going to be used to the Flyers having a mid-afternoon game tomorrow while they're on the West Coast trip. Yeah, there you go. The OG JH says, I got the alert. Let's go. Well, good. Maybe 2026 is going to give us the alerts that we're trying to set on the YouTube channel. We'll see how it goes. Let's see. Chris Fried is here. I survived New Year's. There was nothing crazy going on for New Year's. Can I tell you? I feel like almost everybody I know, there is like an illness running through the world, through this region. Although I know somebody out west who's like deathly ill right now as well. Went through this house. Our kids, our two youngest, were just like really sick for a bit last week. And it's just, I don't know. Could it have been a flu? Was it a stomach bug? Who knows what was going on around Christmas? But even going to Christmas Mass, church just full of coughing people. I was like, oh boy, not this. But everybody's healthy. Everybody's good now. So we'll go into this final weekend of break and enjoy it. I don't know. It was crazy. Usually the second is where you kind of do the cutoff, right, for the winter break. And for whatever reason this year, I guess it's just because today's a Friday, schools aren't going to make you go back in for a day and then hit the weekend. The kids, man, they're rammy. They're oddly enough, like kind of ready to go back to school, I think, which is always a good sign. Bondarenko with a Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's to you as well, Greg. Nick says, our Eagles won the Super Bowl. That is correct. Joe Papel is here with a Happy New Year. Joe also asks, any plans to meet up with some fans in Fort Lauderdale? I don't know. This is the thing with work is I don't have a lot of downtime when I'm on these work trips. Like I spend pretty much the entire day in meetings. There's like a little gap to like grab a little bit of dinner. And then there's usually events at night to go to. So I almost never have actual downtime to like chat with anybody. Last year, I think I had a later flight leaving Florida. So I walked like a mile and a half or something to go get coffee. So like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Maybe, perhaps. Bondarenko was out, by the way, on Tuesday. Came out to Chickies and Pete's at Parks Casino. Met the Snow the Goalie crew. Very nice to meet Greg. Lovely time. Make sure you come on out to the next show. Where's the next one we're at? We're at Parks this week. We're in Glassboro. We're in Glassboro next week, which also happens to be on the same day as two of my son's birthdays. So we're gonna have to figure that one out. I gotta make that up to them, I guess, because I don't think they want to come out to Chickies and Pete's in Glassboro to watch their dad do a radio show. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Let's see. Andrew Fawcett's here with the greetings. Happy New Year. Hello. Joe Papel says, unfortunately, the Flyers have improved into hockey purgatory. We'll talk about that. I don't agree with that for once. And also asks, how do they acquire generational talent? I don't know if they will. I don't know if they can. I don't think they can, given the way things are lining up right now, which could be a problem. Fawcett says, Phillies are on the decline. Flyers are looking up. Eagles are frustrating. I can't speak about the Sixers. Okay. Chris Fried says, Russ starting 2026 by going all Negadelphia on the Phillies. They stink. They haven't done anything to improve the team. Not a damn thing. Bullpen's a little bit better. Adolis Garcia is essentially Nick Castellanos. Justin Crawford. Okay. I don't know. Is he really a center fielder? If they were going to hand him the center field job, like, why didn't they call him up at all this past season when they could have used it? I don't know. It's wild. Flyers Purgatory says, if you're more positive on the Flyers than Sixers or Phillies, you're insane. Well, I'm going relative to where the team was entering the year. The Flyers and the Sixers ended 2025 in a better place holistically than the Phillies did. And the Phillies enter 2026 in a worse spot because I don't think they've gotten better. While we've watched the Dodgers continue to get better, we've seen some other teams continue to improve. I don't know. I mean, good luck. Do the Phillies have a better chance of winning the World Series than the Flyers do the Stanley Cup? Of course. Do the Phillies have a better chance of winning the World Series than the Sixers of winning the NBA Finals? Very likely. But like relative to them entering the past year, I don't think the Phillies are better. Amadeus says Middleton is a cheap state. I don't think that's true. I just think that at some point, every owner, regardless of how much money they have, they just hit a certain spending threshold that they don't want to pass anymore. And Middleton splashed a lot of cash on a lot of guys that got a job done, but not the job done. And I don't know how much higher of a payroll you need to get to for something to make legitimate sense. And I think that ultimately they're going to lose Ranger Suarez, and I think it's going to really hurt their team. I really do. I mean, I want to go down this like Phillies rabbit hole right now, but I thought that they were going to make the biggest offer to Amai. I thought that was the goal, was they were going to let Ranger Suarez go. They were going to bring in Amai. That was going to be their first real impact Japanese player, and they were going to try to start a pipeline of Japanese talent over the next few years, and that was how they were going to replenish their roster. They were going to get some guys that could maybe be higher impact players. I thought that was going to be the move. It did not come to fruition. He's going to Houston, right? And I don't know what the Phillies seem to me like a team that is so actively banking on Andrew Painter to be an impact player. And the problem is that the guy that you're potentially letting go in Ranger Suarez isn't just like some schlub. He's a guy who not only can execute at a high level in the regular season, but has proven to be clutch in the playoffs. So now you're going to remove that. And in doing so, you're probably then shifting Aaron Nola up in your rotation, who seems like a good dude, but like Aaron Nola's best days do not feel like they're ahead of him. They feel like they're behind him as a pitcher. So I don't know. I mean, good luck. I'm going to continue to root for the Phillies. I don't feel like they're trending in the right direction. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to like say something to make you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum if I don't believe it. Let's see. There was some other stuff over here. Joe Papel asks, Russ, aren't the Flyers further from acquiring a generational talent than before? Well, in order for them to acquire a generational talent, they were going to have to finish in the bottom three to make themselves insulated from getting jumped out of the top three twice. And I don't see a scenario where the Flyers are going to finish in the bottom three. They had John Tortorella as a coach. They were not going to end up in the bottom three with him there. They hired Rick Tocchet. They were not going to end up in the bottom three. I will stand resolute in the belief that the Travis Konecny re-signing was the signal that they were not going to tear this thing all the way down. And I think he would have gotten them some useful assets. And you combine that with the fact that Matvei Michkov came over early, and I think it was earlier than they expected, and they felt like they couldn't just have a losing culture with Matvei Michkov here. The expectations were going to be higher as soon as he came over. And I think it changed the calculus on everything for them. Whether they ever admit that on the record or not, I don't know. But I don't think they were ever that close to getting a generational talent because I don't think they were ever really committed to going to the bottom. So, the other way that you could do that is through a trade. I wouldn't say that they have a ton of assets that are attractive in a trade. And then you have free agency. Well, the 2026 free agent class went up in smoke. And the only other place that you can look is like 2027. All right, do you want to look at 27? Do you want to have the conversation about like trying to woo Quinn Hughes in free agency then? That would be a way to get a generational player. Do you try to like make yourself absolutely insane thinking about Connor McDavid hitting free agency the same offseason? Well, yeah, I mean, that's a generational talent. I don't know. I feel like they've made a few mistakes here. But I don't think they were ever going to get to a point where they were going to find a generational talent. Nick here says, I'd rather choose the Sixers future over the Flyers. The big reason that there's some truth to that is because unlike the Flyers, the Sixers have a guy playing at an MVP level. That is Tyrese Maxey. They have an impact rookie who looks like he might be the best player in that draft class, who's playing like a 7-year, 8-year NBA vet in VJ Edgecombe. You have guys like Barlow that are making really meaningful contributions. You have Embiid, who's like looked like he's rolled back the clock, right, in the last 6 games. You have Paul George looking like he's getting more comfortable in this kind of like tertiary scoring role. So like, I don't know. I mean, I've gotten duped by the Sixers before, but it's kind of hard to look at them right now and feel like anything other than kind of positive. Let's see. Fawcett says, I'm healthy. Then again, I avoid people. That's probably why. Amy is here, says, sickness hit my house too. My 5-year-old woke up on Christmas morning with a fever. Didn't even want to open his presents. Poor kid. I hope your 5-year-old's feeling better now and has opened those presents, being very, very excited with the holiday season. Let's see. Flyers Purgatory says, Phillies have Painter, Miller, and Crawford coming. Sixers Edgecombe and Maxey. Flyers are praying they can find 2 moronic GMs to give the most important pieces of a team for a scrappy guys in return. Well, Painter, again, didn't dominate the minors last year. Crawford, they wouldn't call up under any circumstances. I've heard that he's really not a center fielder. Miller, I have no idea what to expect from. So, like, yeah, you have 3 prospects that you're really bullish on. I don't know if any of them are going to come up and be immediate impact guys. We'll find out. Let's see. Joe Papel asks, remember when Ruben banked on Dom Brown? Oh, those were the days. Those were the days. Flyers Purgatory says Bellinger, Bregman, Bichette, and Ranger all still free agents. MLB offseason is terrible. It's not over till spring training. That's Scott Boras, though. Let's see. Yerk 21 says tanking really rarely works. It all depends on how and who you draft and how you developed, all while signing and trading for the right players. Yeah. There's some truth to that, but man, like when you look at San Jose with Celebrini, it feels like they have a star. When you look at Bedard with Chicago, looks like they have a star. When you look at what Anaheim's kind of built, it's taken a long time, but they've got some star players, including a guy that the Flyers drafted. So, yeah, it's not a guarantee. And we always make fun of Buffalo, but Buffalo's been on a heater. I'm still not convinced that Buffalo is going to do anything of value, but you never know. Like they've been drafting at the top for a long time. They've had some really bad player personnel decisions in terms of guys that they've dealt. But you know, it's not a guarantee that it's going to work. Edmonton was bad for a while, but they ended up with a generational player, arguably the best player in hockey in McDavid, probably the best number 2 man in the league in Draisaitl. Colorado hit the tank for a long time, and they ended up with a Stanley Cup winner and a perennial contender. Florida had some down years, and they managed to make, I mean, probably the Tkachuk-Huberdeau trade is one of the craziest, most impactful deals that's happened in the last decade. And Florida's been set up for long-term success and has built back-to-back Stanley Cup winners. So I don't know. I really don't know. I know that, you know, it's easy to say that tanking doesn't work, but at the same time, Stanley Cup winners typically have a number 1 pick on their team. The Flyers do not have a number 1 pick. So I don't know. Make it make sense. Chris Freed says Flyers are no longer a destination franchise in the NHL. Banking on free agency was always going to fail. Well, the big thing too is that, you know, there's a cap. So you can't just, you know, go out and do the Ed Snyder splash the big money and then also treat your players incredibly well and have that be a thing. Like everybody's been kind of leveled off. That's just how this works with a cap. Let's see. Chris says, I know Russ getting hot and bothered by the Sixers. It's like Warren Buffett investing in airlines. Wally 6040 says Martone is a better prospect for the Flyers than any of those Phillies prospects. I tend to agree. Think about a year ago, we probably would have said Painter felt like more of a sure thing. But again, last year, And then you also had injuries. Like I'm not sure. Not sure what he is. Crimson Cade, I think this is about the Flyers, says, actually have been enjoying this rebuild, been watching since Hextall tried to explode Chelio's face. I like their prospect pool. I think a lot of people are down because Michkov isn't panning out. I'm at a point right now with the Michkov of it all where I'm like, I'm not writing off the season. And I think all these people who are like, oh, just wait until, February, wait till the Olympic break for him to catch up with his conditioning. I think it's all bullshit. I think he's already playing better. I think you've seen on this West Coast swing, he's looked more confident. I think that, nobody wants to say it. Nobody on the Flyers beat seems to want to say it. I do think that there's been some questionable decision-making by the coach about how he's using Michkov. I think Tocchet was rubbed the wrong way with how Michkov came into camp. And then he came in out of shape. I think they tried to run cover with this ankle injury that I'm not sure ever existed. And I think Michkov is really trying to win back the trust of the coach. I think that's where we're at right now. I don't think that this is just Michkov all of a sudden became an incredibly shitty skater. He wasn't a great skater in the first place. He wasn't a fast skater. But I do think that you're seeing him make enough of a positive impact that he's earning the minutes that he's getting. He just has to I don't know how he's going to do it, but he needs to earn that trust of the head coach. Once he does, I think you're going to see Michkov look like the guy he was a year ago. And I don't think it has to take until the Olympic break for it to happen. But it is wild. Just watching the way that some of the beats are trying to frame the Michkov discourse right now is pretty wild. And I'm just glad that that's not my primary point of income for our family. I'll tell you what, I think that going into 2026, the thing that I'm the most interested in outside of the games themselves is the way that the media cover each of these teams, because you're starting to see the Sixers beats get a lot more positive about things because the team looks better. You're watching the Flyers beats in a lot of ways talking about this Flyers team in a much more positive light because the results look better year over year. And in doing so, they're also I don't know if they're trying to tamp down expectations around Michkov. I'm not totally sure, but it feels like there's this weird collective media narrative going on around Michkov that I can't fully wrap my head around. There's a very vocal part of Flyers Twitter that complains about everything. And now they're trying to go to war with the media, and the media is trying to go back to war with the fans. And I think everybody just needs to take a chill pill. Just kind of take a deep breath. It's year 3 of this, quote unquote rebuild. I think they're in a better place than they were a year ago. We'll see how it goes. Let's see. We had a bunch of back and forths here about tanking. I mean, Yerk is right here. The thing with the Nolan Patrick pick, other than the fact that, Hextall went against the scouts, and really quick, I want the people that have been trying to grift as if they had this story back when it happened, because they didn't. The people who are trying to grift on this notion that Hextall overrode the scouts in not picking Makar. Heiskanen was the guy that the scouts wanted. It wasn't Makar. I mean, there might've been a few that were high on Makar, but Heiskanen was the guy that they were the most in on. And Hextall wanted a center, and he went out and he got his center, and it didn't work out. So I don't know. Let's see. What's this? Flyers Purgatory says Celebrini draft is funny because Ant and others said the Flyers and Torts were doing God's work for clawing for points. We ain't tanking. There's no Bedard in this draft. Now Celebrini is clearly better. Celebrini looks incredible. And he's a guy that it feels like the last year or so has leveled up his game in a massive, massive way. So, yeah, I mean, the fake playoff run is the thing. If we ever, if the Flyers don't get to a point where they're in Stanley Cup contention for over the next 5 to 8 years, at whatever point you're ready to flip that switch and try to go for it. If they don't ever become that, and if this front office ultimately loses their jobs and doesn't get the job done, I think we're going to look at that 1 year. It's going to be that single year is the thing that ultimately doomed the entire rebuild. We could have the conversation about Cutter Gauthier, and look, he looks fantastic for Anaheim right now. But if you look at the Cutter Gauthier for Jamie Drysdale trade and you lump in the Ryan Poehling for Trevor Zegras trade, which you can't do, but on aggregate, maybe you can. If you look at those together, where it's Cutter Gauthier and Ryan Poehling for Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale, there's a case to be made that it's a much closer battle than you think. It's a much closer value than you think. But like if Gauthier ends up being like a 40-plus goal scorer and you had him here and somebody screwed up along the way, somebody tainted Cutter Gauthier's impression of this team, this organization, and I don't know what to tell you. But I think it's the fake playoff run that really hurts them, because even if you think back to that draft, right, they were never close enough to being able to actually go out and get a guy like Demidov, who was just named Rookie of the month, a guy that I was really interested in the Flyers being able to get. They decided not to draft Zeev Buium. They took Jet Lachenko, and I am at the point now where I'm glad that there are other people who are starting to say the same thing that I've been saying and are seeing the same thing that I've been seeing, which is that Lachenko right now projects to be a bottom six forward. And that is a problem. And there is no one who can convince me otherwise that, oh, well, you know, he's a year younger than the rest of his draft class. It's all bullshit. And I don't care. I don't want to hear it. I do not care, because I look at players relative to their contemporaries. And the fact that the Flyers had a guy that became the centerpiece of a trade for a potentially cornerstone generational defensive prospect or player, one of the 4 best, 3 best, 2 best defensemen in the entire NHL in Quinn Hughes. Zeev Buium was the centerpiece of that deal. Yes, Marco Rossi was an important part, but Zeev Buium was the main piece of that deal. Vancouver wanted a defenseman to replace that defenseman, Quinn Hughes. They, of course, wanted a center, which is what Rossi was. But don't forget, that offseason, everybody had the opportunity to go after Marco Rossi. Not a single team did. I would say that on merit, Zeev Buium right now, or on balance, Zeev Buium was the centerpiece of that trade. The Flyers could have had him. They chose not to draft him. They took Jet Lachenko instead. Zeev Buium was moved for Quinn Hughes. God knows if he's going to stay with Minnesota or not. It's really not the point. It's just that he was a valuable enough prospect to be the centerpiece of a trade. Jet Lachenko right now is a 4th liner on Team Canada. And yes, you can come back and say, well, there are a certain number of player positions available, spots on that roster. And well, he's at World Junior and, you know, good for him. And that means that he's still better than a lot of other young Canadian prospects. And to that, I would say it's a shame that a guy who was a 1st-round draft pick in year 2 of a rebuild is a 4th line wing. He's not even playing his natural position. And I don't care that he's a year younger. I'm not the one who made the pick. I didn't decide to, you know, do 4D chess and say, well, if you wait another year, if he had missed being drafted in this class, he might've been the 7th overall pick. Like, I don't care. I do not care. To me, he doesn't look like an impact player. I clearly hope that at some point, during World Junior, maybe Jet Lachenko has a breakout game. You feel good. He gets his confidence up, and then he goes off to junior again. And, you know, maybe he becomes a 2-point per game player. You start to feel better about it. And he even makes a push for a spot on a playoff roster for the Flyers, or he makes a push for, you know, a spot on next year's roster, because this team desperately needs a center to step up and to come to the forefront and get the job done. And at this point, they don't seem to have a guy in the system who's close to being ready to be that center. Now, Jack Berglund being the captain of Sweden certainly makes you wonder. I tweeted out the other day, like, Berglund playing the way that he has and being the captain of Sweden makes you think. It probably puts him more on your radar. I mean, is he going to come and be a center and an impact center for this Flyers team? I have no idea. But prior to World Junior, there weren't a lot of people outside of the Flyers organization talking much about him. So I don't know. We'll see. Lachenko, though, to me, is just, you know, if he becomes anything more than a bottom 6 forward, we, you know, be happy. And at the same time, we'll feel like he probably fucked that pick up. But you know what? Not every front office is able to have a perfect draft record. So I don't know. All right. I'm so fucking sick of talking about Jet Lachenko. I just hope that he does something good. I do. I don't wish ill, you know, and I don't want to be right when it comes to Lachenko. I would love for him to turn into a legitimate like 2C or something, but I don't see it. Let's see. Wally says, not worried about Michkov at all. Bedard took a bit of time to get going. The fact that he has Michkov on a lower power play line than Brink and Cates is disgusting. Well, that's its own thing. I mean, that's probably true. I don't know what we're doing there. The Bedard thing is true, though, because if you remember back to the first time, I think it was, that Bedard and Michkov played against each other, there were a lot of Flyers fans who were like, see, look, we ended up with the best player. Bedard is fantastic. It's actually kind of wild to see that he didn't make the national team, but, you know, that might be a conversation for another day. Chris Freed says Cutter gets a hat trick against the Flyers next week. How do the fans in the arena react? I mean, they'll be livid. I think it's going to be an absolute madhouse on Tuesday. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I don't know. All right, let's see. Greg Bondarenko says if Cutter has a big game against the Flyers, he'll be the next Crosby where he gets booed every time he's on the ice. That's going to happen no matter what. That will not happen at all. What is this? My wife says, hi, happy new year. We need to buy a new living room TV. I think it's broken. Oh no, we have to buy a new TV for the living room. A bigger TV for the living room. What a shame. That's horrible. How will we survive? I didn't break it. I did not break it. I maybe once broke my own cell phone to get a new cell phone, but I definitely didn't break the TV. That was not me. I didn't break it. Okay. Let's see. I totally missed this thing about the TV. All right, good. Cool. I don't think it's actually broken, but maybe it is. Who knows? Andrew Fawcett sends over a $2 super chat, says donation towards a new TV. Thank you, Fawcett. Yo, I got to tell you, I'm actually pretty excited though. Like if we're getting a new TV, Bondarenko, you're right. Geek Squad's come. Oh yeah. We're a total tech family in this house. Oh yeah. We have the Best Buy rewards. Hell yeah. Oh yeah. New TV. Oh, what a shame. What a shame. Shucks. Okay. Well, we'll see. All right. Let's see. All right. I want to try to get into some of the stuff that I actually have planned for today's show. I went into the comments here a lot, and we gotta get going on the rest of this. So, OGJH says, "Oh no, not a big OLED TV from Costco." You know what? Costco might actually be in the running for a new TV. I'm gonna have to go evaluate Best Buy versus Costco. I can get Best Buy to come out and install it though. I don't know if the mount that we have in the living room right now is good enough. These are things I have to think about now. What a shame. Truly a shame. York might be right. Russ is going to come home with an 85-inch TV. See, here's the thing. We have a beautiful 77-inch TV in the basement. We redid our basement a few years ago. And I was like, I want to have a movie, like a movie theater quality TV in the basement. And we have it all set up where like, it is a great spot to like watch a movie as a family. But in our living room, it's a very big wall. And that TV has always looked really small on the wall. And so I've wanted to get a bigger TV. And I did not break this TV. If I had broken the TV, no, I didn't. But this is like that OJ thing. Didn't OJ Simpson like try to write a book? Like if I had done it, I should do that but I didn't actually break the TV. OJ. But anyway, I'm not actually worried about getting like the highest picture quality. The one down here is incredible, but like a bigger TV that like has, good picture quality. I don't need I'm not getting a $3,000 TV for the living room. No, thank you. But like a, 80-inch TV. I'm like waiting to see if I can hear her yell. 80-inch TV. Probably fair. 100-inch TV. I don't know. 80 though, maybe 75. We'll see. Anyway, I'll give you guys an update next week. She just yelled no. So, okay. Not getting an 85-inch TV. All right, let's get to the stuff that I actually planned for today's show. Good God. We're 39 minutes in. We've gone back and forth in the comments. I want to get to a few of the things that I find the most notable this week, if that's okay. I also need everybody to pressure Video Guy Amadeo, who's in the comments right now. I have asked this man to make notes on timestamps because some of you have requested that there would be timestamps on the YouTube video and over in the podcast feed. And I've said to Video Guy Amadeo before, can you make a note of the timestamps? Because I want to put that in. It's also better for the video. It's better for SEO for the video. And we've not gotten to that point yet. So everybody has to shame Amadeo in the comments. Thank you. That's going to be our commitment to 2026. Timestamps in the comments. So here we are. All right. Anyway, I want to start with the Sixers. We'll go Sixers, Flyers, and then we'll end with the Eagles because the Eagles are resting their starters and there aren't as many big things to talk about with the Eagles. So I want to go to the Sixers first. I know that I have this habit of believing in the Sixers. I am notorious for seeing the first sign of life for the Sixers and just believing that it's all going to finally come together. And I have spent far too many seasons opening myself up and then getting hurt by the Sixers year after year after year. And I've said this how many times now? You know who I blame? I blame my Bob, and may she rest in peace. But she and I would watch the Sixers games together. That was the thing that we bonded over more than anything. And so I imagine in my mind that in my heart that the Sixers are like this living remnant. This is how I still live with this memory of my Bob. So I just cannot give up on the Sixers, even when the world and the sky is falling around the Sixers. I still try to remind myself that it's going to get better and things are going to be better. But I got to tell you, I feel better about the Sixers right now than I have felt about them in at least 2 years. And I'm going to give you some numbers to back it up. And again, everything is over a finite period of time. Now, we can look at Tyrese Maxey, just Tyrese Maxey, and say that guy has played like a legitimate MVP candidate this year. He's averaging almost 31 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 7.2 assists. He's shooting 47% from the field. He's shooting just under 40% from three. All of those averages are up from his career numbers. He is up almost 10.5 points over his career average. He's up like almost 1.5 rebounds per game. He's up almost 2.5 assists per game. His field goal percentage is up by like 1%. His three-point shooting has gone up by about 1% over his career average. So you look at all of that and you say, all right, here is a player who has continued year over year to get better and better and better. And I've said it before. I've said it multiple times in the show already. I think he will get legitimate consideration and votes for MVP. And if this Sixers team does somehow start to climb the rankings in a meaningful way, they're sitting at 5th as we record the show on Friday. If they continue to win, and if they continue to put together strong stretches, and they can get themselves up into the top 2, top 3 of the conference, I think he will get more and more consideration. And I know it seems crazy, but like, all right, we got it, Russ. Like Tyrese Maxey plays really well, but you can't win with just one guy. That's not how this works. You are correct. And that's why I get so much enjoyment and excitement out of watching VJ Edgecombe play, because I think that all along Tyrese Maxey has needed another backcourt mate who could get the job done, not at as high of a level, but pretty damn close. And Edgecombe has been fantastic. He's shooting about 38% from beyond the arc and about 43% from the field, 16.1 points per game, 5.4 rebounds per game, 3.9 assists per game. And you watch him each and every game seemingly just continue to build his confidence, build on the previous game's results. Last 2 games, he's had 25 points and 23 points respectively. Over the last 5 games, he's had 3 performances of 23 points or more. You even look at just his ability. You know, we talked about this coming into the season. Edgecombe was not seen as a guy who had a reliable shot from beyond the arc. Over the last 2 games, he has shot 8 of 16 from beyond the arc. That is 50% from beyond the arc. And all of a sudden, you start to think to yourself, all right, there's confidence on the offensive end. How's it translating to the defensive end and back and forth? And if I'm not going to play the clip here, because if I do, I'm going to have the whole thing with YouTube and I don't need it. But if you look at the chase down block that he had against Dallas, he had what was essentially a double block. He comes in from, it looked like, I think about a step or 2 right inside the top of the arc is when he initiates his couple of steps to get to the shot as it's going up to the backboard. And Edgecombe blocks the shot with his left hand. And as the ball ricochets off the backboard, he then comes over the top with his right hand and smacks it into the crowd. So, yes, it's only one block, but it legitimately looked like a double block. It looked like a play out of like NBA Street Volume 2. A block off the rebound and then smacks it, like spikes it into the crowd. So VJ Edgecombe has unbelievable athleticism, like you would almost say otherworldly athleticism. He's got a 3-point shot that is far beyond what he was expected to have and what he even had going into the draft. He has an ability to slash in a way that is reminiscent of Dwayne Wade, and he has a very good head on his shoulders. So you put those things together and you say, all right, Edgecombe is everything that this Sixers team needed alongside Tyrese Maxey. Now, they earlier in the season were experimenting more with VJ Edgecombe as a ball handler, which I thought was like probably a little bit premature. You also have a guy like Quentin Grimes that comes off the bench and can get you a lot of buckets, right? He can put up 20-ish points a game if you really need him to. Jared McCain still hasn't even come close to finding his stride. And guess what? Jared McCain, if he's able to even regain like 50, 60, 70% of what he was a year ago, prior to meniscus surgery. And of course, he had the thumb surgery in the offseason. You put him back in as a guy who can hit some threes. Maybe he doesn't have the same speed and athleticism and slashing ability that he had a year ago. Maybe that's going to take him until later this season. Maybe it takes him an entire offseason of conditioning and being back at it. But like, there's a lot of depth there for the future. Grimes, whether he's back next year or not, doesn't really matter. As of right now, they have a lot of very good depth at guard. I mentioned Barlow before. He's just been, I think, a guy who has just exceeded every expectation. But ultimately, he's not the guy that makes the determination of whether or not this team can get to the top 2, top 3 in the conference, whether they can go on a deeper playoff run. No, those players are Paul George and Joel Embiid. And so you look at where those guys have been, right? Paul George has gotten to a point where he seems to be settling into that tertiary scoring role. He's not the alpha. He's not the number 2 option. Really, he should be the number 3 option on this team. And I would say that that's regardless of whether or not Joel Embiid is in the lineup. If Embiid isn't in the lineup, well, then in theory, I like the idea of Maxey and Edgecombe getting the lion's share of shots. Paul George still is your 3rd option, right? A guy who can bring the team up the court, can bring the ball up, can run a half-court set, is a guy that can be a reliable ball handler, sure, is a guy that can now, pop a shot, can hit, catch, and shoot threes, yes. As a guy who has a good mid-range game, yes. When Embiid is in the lineup, all right, cool, then switch Edgecombe and Embiid. Maybe it's a Maxey gets the lion's share of shots. We know Embiid's going to put up a lot of shots. Paul George can remain at that number 3, and Edgecombe becomes your number 4 when Embiid's in the lineup. That's okay, because as long as Embiid looked like he's looked the last 5 or so games, guess what? He might not be an MVP guy, right? He might not be MVP Joel Embiid, but man, he certainly looks like perennial all-star Joel Embiid. And I know that we've all been duped before. We've all gotten our hopes up before, but man, right now, it is hard to look at what this team has accomplished in recent games and the way that these guys are starting to gel together. These big 4 are gelling together. You have to have at least a little bit of hope. You have to start to think to yourself, you know what? There's something going on here. And I will note, Joel Embiid over his last 5 games, 27.2 points, 7.8 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.6 blocks, and he's got a true shooting percentage of 57.9%. He's starting to look like a better physical version of Joel Embiid. He doesn't look as slow and plodding as he did earlier in the season and as he did over the course of last season. I'm not saying he's fully back healthy. I'm not saying that he's back to prime Joel Embiid. I don't know if we're ever going to see that player again, but man, this version of Joel Embiid is a problem for the opposition. Now, Maxey, I mentioned, has been incredible. VJ Edgecombe has been really, really good. I will also point out the fact that I think Paul George has made real strides in finding his spot in this lineup. And it says a lot about a guy when you go from being a number 1 option to being with a team like Indy and even with an Oklahoma City, and being a guy who was a 1 or 2 option with the Clippers, with Kawhi Leonard. It's one thing when you are pursued by teams and when you're relied on teams to be a number 1 or number 2 option. Here, he is very clearly like a number 3 option. And last year, it felt like in the limited games that he played, remember, he only played 41 of the 82 regular season games last year. It never really felt like he kind of hit his stride for the Sixers, right? Like, he averaged 16 points per game. And his shooting percentage, if I remember correctly, was like one of the lowest ones in the last 3-4 years. Yeah, 43% from the field. That was the lowest since 21-22 when he shot 42.1% from the field. And if you go back even further, the only other time he had shot below 43% from the field was 2015-2016 when he played for Indy. This year, shooting percentage is actually down 40.6%. His 3-point percentage is up year over year by 3%, 38.8 versus 35.8 a year ago. I still look at all this and I say, you know what? There is reason to believe that he is finding his game and he's looking better and he's looking like a guy who's got a little bit more confidence. I think the thing that players need more than anything is consistency, and they need to know that as long as they're willing to kind of buy into what is being asked of them by the team, by the coaching staff, as long as they know what the expectation is, they're going to feel better and they're going to be able to prepare accordingly. Like, if you don't know if you're going to really be relied on as the number 3 scorer and you feel like you still need to kind of go out there and play like a number 1, number 2 option, well, you're going to play differently than when you know, all right, I am the number 3 option on this team. I need to work more on my spot up shooting, whatever it is. Paul George seems to be kind of hitting his stride now. So against Dallas on New Year's Day, he played 33 minutes. He had 14 points. He went 0 for 3 from beyond the arc, but he shot 45.5% from the field. Not terrible, not great, but like a good third option. 7 rebounds, 1 steal, 2 assists. On the 30th, he played 39 minutes in an overtime win against Memphis. And that was a game where he had 17 points to go along with, what do you have? 3 rebounds and 3 assists. If you're going to get a guy, and let me just think back to, what was it? It was before Christmas. So his last 5 games, he hasn't scored any fewer than 12 points. He's been in or around that 4 or so rebounds. He had that one outlier game where he had 12 rebounds. But like for the most part, he's playing and producing at what you would expect a number 3 to do. And by the way, if you were to get to a point where Paul George can put up enough shots to get somewhere in that 17, 18 points per game range, while being the craftiest wing this team has, and Joel Embiid is still getting his shots, and Tyrese Maxey is still getting his shots, and VJ Edgecombe is getting prioritized as having his shots, then guess what? All of a sudden, if Paul George is your number 4, but he can still score at an efficient pace, it's probably the best version of this team. Like, I would make the argument that having VJ Edgecombe playing at his highest level right now versus Paul George at his highest level, I think that short and long term, the Sixers are probably better with Edgecombe reaching his max potential right now than they would be with Paul George. I think Paul George as a 3 or a 4 option is pretty damn good. So we will see. All right. So we had that. Now, there was a really interesting quote that came out from Tyrese Maxey that I wanted to get to. And then somebody else had something to say about Paul George from the national perspective. So I want to get to those before we move on to the Flyers and to the Eagles. But Tyrese Maxey was asked what it was like to play in Philadelphia, because obviously the national media has a certain narrative they like to run with about playing in Philadelphia. And Maxey met the question head on, didn't try to deflect. I just want to go out to Tyrese Maxey here real quick with what it's like to play in Philadelphia.
How do you like playing Philly? Because a lot of players aren't. I'm just looking at the fans. Like,
I love it.
A lot of people aren't built for it.
I love it. It's definitely a tough place to play.
Yeah.
If you're not tough, if you don't
got thick skin.
Yeah, if you ain't got thick skin, this is not the place for you. You know what I mean? Like, the fans are gonna hold you accountable. They're gonna do all those different things, but they say love you, they love you. You know what I'm saying? If you just go out there and you play hard every night, they're not gonna really, they ain't gonna trip about much.
Isn't that kind of like what every player says? Like, if you find success in the city, it's a great place to play. If you don't find success here and you look to try to blame everyone else under the sun and take no accountability, then guess what? The city's going to hate you. It's just how it works. We're just very vocal about that. There are other markets where, you know, underperforming players aren't hated necessarily, but they're also not loved, but they're also not as vocal with their disdain for that player. Now, I do want to get to something that I thought was really notable, right? So Maxey kind of gave you something that you would expect. But I want to go out to somebody who I think over the course of his career had not an exact trajectory, but a similar-ish trajectory to Paul George. Being a high pick, high-ish. I mean, this guy was a higher pick than Paul George, but a guy who went from being the focal point on a team, star player on a team, to being somebody who played alongside another star player. This one played with Allen Iverson. Paul George obviously played with Kawhi Leonard. And then eventually, as their careers went on, they had to figure out a way to kind of pivot and no longer be the number 1 option. That's Carmelo Anthony. So Carmelo had a really interesting thing to say over on New Year's Eve about the Sixers team, and most notably about Paul George and about whether or not he thought that Paul George could ultimately make it work here in Philadelphia as a number 3 option on the team. And I want you to hear from Carmelo, because I'm just a guy. I'm just an idiot, right? But I'll go out to Carmelo because I do respect Carmelo's take on the Philadelphia 76ers and on Paul George. Let's hear what Carmelo had to say about young Paul George.
Right, and we sat here and talked about PG being that third option on the team. And it's like we had an argument, or not an argument, a debate. Is PG the best third option out there in the NBA? And if they plan this way and PG continues to find his way, because I know going from a guy who needs the ball in his hand to just got to spot up and just get the ball, it's a tough transition to make. Mm-hmm. But I think PG is coming along. I think his health is getting better. Sure. And if Joel is playing like that and Maxey and those guys playing and Kelly Oubre comes back, Philly is a tough out in the playoffs.
The Kelly Oubre thing is like something that I don't think we talk enough about either. Like, that's a guy that the Sixers relied on in such a heavy way over his tenure on this team. And man, you add him back into the lineup and all of a sudden it feels like it's an even deeper team. And you're able to kind of mitigate some of those games where Paul George might not be in the lineup. But Carmelo saying that he might be the best number 3 option in the league is pretty telling, right? And it's not, and you have to imagine, right? Paul George has played in this game, in this league, long enough period of time that there are probably conversations between those two or between people who know each of those guys. And so the fact that you don't have Carmelo saying, hey, Paul George is better than this, he should at least be your number 2 option, or Paul George deserves more. That tells me that there is not a feeling out there that Paul George is being underutilized by this team, which I find very interesting. Does that mean that Paul George is also kind of admitting to those around him, right, and to those in league circles that, like, hey, I realize that my role needs to change? You cannot deny what Tyrese Maxey has become. You cannot deny the fact that if he's relatively healthy, it's still in some way, shape, or form Joel Embiid's team, or Embiid has enough money in the bank with this team that he's going to be that number 2 option or whatever. And you also can't deny that VJ Edgecombe has had a hell of a rookie season. So if you're a smart guy, and I think Paul George is, you probably look around and say, all right, I have to figure out a way to make this work. And I also would posit, when Paul George was signed here, I don't think he was told he was going to be, the Robin to Joel Embiid's Batman. It was very clear that this team was starting to look to Tyrese Maxey as the future and Joel Embiid as the present day, but they very clearly were the 2 guys on the team. And Paul George signed here for a lot of money and for years, kind of with the understanding that, like, hey, you're probably not going to be that number 2 with a heavy dosage of shots every game. So I think it's interesting. I'm kind of happy to see it playing out the way that it is right now. And I want to believe, again, this team continues to gel together. And even when an Embiid comes out of the lineup or a Paul George comes out of the lineup, maybe it's only once every 4 or 5 games, right? Instead of every other game or every third game. If these guys can actually build some kind of chemistry, some kind of understanding with one another, they will be a tough out in the playoffs. They will. Now, does it mean that they're going to be a ridiculously deep team? No, not necessarily. Does it mean that they're going to be a team that's going to make a conference final or an NBA final? No, but I would like to believe that there's a possibility. What's this? Yams 999 text plan says George is a great team defender. His ability to guard athletic wings worries me. We'll see what this looks like when they're, over the course of the season. We'll see how things look. I don't think he's at his peak athleticism by any stretch, but I do think that he's been better. Wally says Paul George is playing well. He's going to get hurt. It's going to happen. It might, but we'll see. Flyers Purgatory says, I'm fine with George being a 12 to 15 point guy, being halfway decent on defense. I think that's fine. Let's see. Somebody said something. There was Joe Papel. How did Leeds hold Liverpool to a 0-0 draw in the Premier League yesterday? I don't know, Joe. I didn't watch the game. I saw after the fact that I don't know. I don't know. I love Joe. I have no idea. I didn't watch the game. My son might have watched the game. He's a Liverpool fan for who knows what reason. Maybe to just torment me. I have no idea. But yeah. Let's see. There was something interesting that was said in the comments about Maxey versus Allen Iverson. Wally says Iverson had better handles than Maxey. Maxey has better speed. I tend to agree with what Yams 999 says. What's his name? What's his name? Yams 999?
I call it 999.
I think that's probably the true part, that Maxey is a more efficient player than Iverson. Like, I used to find Iverson incredibly maddening to watch. I think if you go back and you watch Allen Iverson now, like, the nostalgia kicks in. But, like, I never felt the in-the-moment nostalgia that a lot of people did and a lot of my peers did. I just always viewed Iverson as an exciting player who's wildly inefficient, right? Like, shot a terrible percentage from the field, put up a ton of shots. And, I think the legend of Iverson is actually better than the player was, even though he's a really good player and he was an MVP and he once won an All-Star MVP, which you can't really see over here, but it's on the wall. I have like the newspaper clipping of when he won the All-Star game MVP. So like, I don't dislike Allen Iverson. I don't think Allen Iverson was like a vastly overrated player. I look at Maxey and I say, like, I think Maxey is kind of like what an Allen Iverson with his head on a little bit better would have looked like, I listen, it is pretty well documented. Iverson was a guy who, dabbled in late night festivities and some vices, perhaps, maybe a little bit of the bubbly every once in a while. And, maybe like to go to the casino. And we know that from his own mouth, right, there were the stories about how he wouldn't pack a bag. He would leave his clothes and he would just buy new clothes every city he went to. And like, he was a guy who kind of like set the culture and everything, right? Like he was more than just a basketball player. Tyrese Maxey is a guy who just looks, he's a basketball player, and he seems like a really good dude. And he seems like he's got his heads, screwed on the right way. So I don't know. I view Maxey as like a much more efficient version of what Iverson could have been. I think that their skill sets overlap a lot. So, you can agree, you can disagree, but that's the beauty of sports, right? Let's see. Chris Freed says Iverson would have been perfect in an individual sport. He played a team sport, unfortunately. Yeah, yeah. Wally says he had to put up a ton of shots because he played with people like Eric Snow and Broken Chris Webber. Yeah, well, remember Keith Van Horn, too. Played with Keith Van Horn. Remember Kenny Thomas, Brian Skinner, right? Corliss Williamson. All three of those guys were traded for Chris Webber. Yeah, Billy King didn't exactly build, the most star-studded rosters around Allen Iverson. That is true. Okay. I want to go to the Flyers now. So we talked about the Sixers. We'll talk Flyers. We'll talk Eagles. And then we're going to probably head out from there. Let's talk about the Flyers. Let's talk about a few things going on in Flyers land. All right. So we knew that the Olympic rosters were going to be coming out. We knew that there was a chance that some of the Flyers were going to ultimately make their Olympic teams. And that, of course, happened for none other than Travis Sanheim. It is a well-deserved honor. And Travis Sanheim is a guy who I have done not a full 180 on, right? Because I thought he was a good player. I just didn't know how good he was eventually going to become. But he was named to the Canadian roster. So, hold on, where's that at? There we go. He was named to the Canadian roster for the Olympics, and it is a very well-deserved honor. So what you'll notice there is that from the Four Nations tournament until the Olympics, so it's a difference of a year, Travis Sanheim makes it. Travis Konecny does not. So, the Four Nations tournament last year, I thought that the Konecny addition to that team was slightly surprising. I thought that Sanheim wasn't going to get a ton of playing time in the Four Nations. But over the past year, regardless of if you're high on Konecny and Sanheim, you're down on them, I think that it's fair to say Sanheim has had a better year at his position for the Flyers than Konecny has had at his. So I'm not surprised to see Konecny not make it. I am happy for Travis Sanheim that he now gets to go represent his country in the Olympics. There were some notable omissions. We mentioned earlier in the show that a Connor Bedard doesn't make the team. So that was certainly something. We also saw Sam Bennett didn't get named, which was also an interesting thing. I do want to go out to, though, we had the Canadian team got announced, but that's not the only one that got announced. So we also saw that Rasmus Ristolainen, ladies and gentlemen, he hasn't played much. He hasn't played much in the last calendar year. But hey, you know what? It's just like the Flyers Twitter account says, go Risto, go. Go Risto, go. Risto got named to Team Finland. So he was not part of the team last year. Remember, there was I believe there was the injury that prevented him from being on that team. So Risto is going to Milan for the Olympics as well. And then that gets you going, all right, was Trevor Zegras going to make the team for the USA to kind of play the TJ Oshie, role and be a guy that if they ever made it to a shootout, they were going to go there? No, he did not make it. That's not surprising. You know what else kind of isn't surprising is who did and did not make Team Sweden. And this should come as absolutely no surprise to anyone, but maybe it will if you've had your head buried in the sand or you just haven't kept up with the Flyers this year. Sam Ersson, who made the Swedish national team for the Four Nations tournament, did not make the Olympic roster for Sweden. Gustafsson, Markstrom, and Wallstedt all made it for Sweden. Sam Ersson did not. Is that fair? Is that unfair? I mean, remember, Sam Ersson looked significantly better at the Four Nations than he did for the Flyers at any point last season. So, I think there was a thought out there. Do you roll with a guy like Ersson, have him on the team because he's been able to play at a pretty high level in international competition? And yet, he doesn't make the roster. And I don't think it's unfair to say that his piss poor play this season had something to do with it. I mean, we could kind of, play semantics here. We can go back and, make an argument that like our Flyers people is the Flyers media, our Flyers fans trying to, overstate just how bad Sam Ersson has been for this team this year. And I say, No, like he has been absolutely atrocious for this team. And I would say that, like, if the Flyers had a somewhat competent backup netminder right now, they might even have like an additional 3 or 4 points this season. Now, we can also point to the fact that early in the season, Ersson was legitimately a sure thing in shootouts, right? Like he could absolutely put away the opposition. But all that said, I just want to put some numbers in front of you right now, okay? Let's take the Sweden of it all out of this, okay? Sam Ersson, over his season so far, is 6-5-4. You might say to yourself, Russ, 6-5-4 isn't that bad. What are we complaining about? Okay. Sam Ersson has a 3.09 goals against. That's 46th in the National Hockey League. Sam Ersson has an .867 save percentage. That is 58th in the National Hockey League. 58th. I'm not expecting somebody to, be a top 30 netminder as a backup. I'm not expecting even like a top 35, maybe not even a top 40. 58th, 867 save percentage, 867 percentage. That's horrific. You're not going to win a lot of games that way. And if we're being fair, Sam Ersson has been good or was good earlier in the season in shootouts, but he does have 4 points that he's helped his team get via overtime losses or shootout losses. So on one hand, you say, well, he's helped to salvage some points and, maybe you have to give him credit. He has not played well. I don't care. Like, even if you're going to somehow tell me that the numbers aren't as bad as they appear, they are bad. They are. You look over his last 4 games, he's allowed 4 goals or more in 3 of his last 4. He gave up 4 goals against Buffalo at Buffalo on 27 shots. He allowed 4 goals on 27 shots against the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. He had a good game, right? Really good game at Chicago. 3-1 win. Only allowed 1 goal on 21 shots. Good on him. Had a .952 save percentage. And then against Calgary on Wednesday, on New Year's Eve, a game that many of us stayed up for, we're hoping was going to propel us into the new year with a lot of gusto and exuberance. He allowed 5 goals on 26 shots, had an .808 save percentage. That is not going to get it done. Now, they're in a weird spot, the Flyers are, because on one hand, if this were a team that were actively trying to tank, Sam Ersson is a perfect backup goalie. You could maybe even make the point that he should be the starting goalie if you're trying to tank games and to lose every game you possibly can. But this team is not doing that. This team is trying to win games. And so I will ask the question that I think a lot of people are asking and have been asking. Many people are asking. They're asking so many about Sam Ersson and also Team Sweden and the Flyers and Danny Briere and also Keith Jones and Dan Hilferty and maybe even Gritty. They're asking Gritty. They're saying, Gritty, what's going on with Sam? What's up with silly Sam Ersson? Is he a disaster, folks? He's been a disaster. He's looking like a very dejected Ilya Bryzgalov, minus the upside. And we loved Ilya Bryzgalov, didn't we? He said, world is so humongous big. Our problems so small, so unbelievably small. Like Sam Ersson's save percentage, very small. It's a terrible save percentage. It's down. It's unbelievably low. In fact, it's one of the lowest save percentages we've ever seen. It's Bidenomics. Bidenomics tearing down Sam Ersson, but we're going to get him back or we're going to send him out. They're going to ship him out. They're going to deport Sam Ersson back to Sweden or to Venezuela or somewhere else. We don't know. We don't know, folks, but we're going to get rid of him. Here's the problem. Sam Ersson's bad. There is no getting around it. He's bad. And Sam Ersson is not going to get better. And a lot of people, many people, were saying if Ersson gets to go play for Team Sweden and he finds his form that he had at 4 Nations, right? If Ersson goes to the Olympics and he plays really well, maybe he'll come back here and he'll play really well down the stretch for the Flyers in a backup role, and they will have 2 goalies that are playing pretty well going into the playoffs, and you never know what happens. He's been bad. There is no way to try to spin this as anything else. Sam Ersson has not gotten it done, and in any other circumstance would be a guy that would have been jettisoned into the sun. However, Flyers are in a weird spot. They don't want to bring Alexei Kolosov up. They certainly don't want to bring up Carson Bjarnason. They don't have another guy who's available easily to plug into that spot. Now, if Kolosov continues to play well in the AHL and around the trade deadline, some lobotomized GM decides to make a trade for Sam Ersson, cool. They'll slot Kolosov in, maybe. but they're trying to get through this season with Ersson as the backup. And don't forget, he's a restricted free agent at the end of the year. So there's a non-zero chance that the Flyers would also like to not totally crater Sam Ersson's value, whatever that value is, because they might be able to get an asset from another team for the exclusive negotiating rights or for those restricted free agency rights. So the Flyers are in a weird spot. You know, they could banish Ersson and bring up Kolosov, and I think they'd probably be better off. But they're not going to do it. And I also don't know if they're at a spot where they're really going to go talk to another team about a lateral move and another goalie who's like at best a backup. I just don't see it. They're in a really weird spot because for a team that is trying to extract every point out of every game, Ersson is not giving them the ability or the chance to do it. He's just not. And you can make a case in some of these games, the defense hasn't played well in front of him. And that is fair to a point. But I will also note that Dan Vladar has the same team playing in front of him. And Vladar has looked every bit like a number one. So make of that what you will. I'm not totally sure what to make of it. Okay. Last thing I wanted to get to, a couple of Eagles notes, right? Now, you know what, hold on, before we do. No, I mentioned this earlier. I mentioned that Kai Wagner is leaving for Birmingham, and it's sad in the union, and we talked about that at the top of the show. Okay. Just looking at my notes here. I actually did notes for today's show. I know. The lunacy, the audacity. Yeah. There was a clip going around from Hard Knocks of Jalen Hurts in the quarterback room talking, I think it was before the Bears game. No, before the Bills game, about all the rain. And so some people really decided to like take exception to what happened in this clip. And they're saying that this clearly shows that Jalen Hurts hates the coaching that he's receiving in Philadelphia. And he doesn't like the game plan that's been installed and all that. I want to show it to you and then just give you, I don't know, my interpretation of it. Okay. So this is Jalen Hurts in the quarterback room. Quarterback coach is next to him. I want you to hear this interaction and we'll talk about it.
It's going to rain. Like there's no ifs, and it's going to rain during the whole game. I don't give a shit if there was bad weather or not. We need to get this going. We need to get this thing.
All right. So the Hurts of it all is kind of hard to hear. All right. We'll try this again.
We need to get this thing. We need this going. We need this going.
So it sounds like he said we need to do that shit. Now I saw some people saying that he said we need to be aggressive, but I think that what you're seeing there, right, is Jalen Hurts with the quarterback coach, Scott Loeffler, who's a guy who people have been kind of speculating might be more involved in the game planning or some of the successful elements of this offense over the last few weeks, last week's second half not included, and that maybe there's a little bit more trust there. And so here you have Jalen Hurts speaking pretty candidly with his quarterback's coach. And I think it's probably pretty safe to say that Hurts doesn't like being restricted the way that Sirianni and Patullo are restricting him. And you can even go back to the Super Bowl last year, or was the NFC Championship game, one of those. Hurts said something to the effect of like, I guess Nick took the straitjacket off me for a game. Like, I think that Hurts is able to take this offense to another level. There is a small part of me that doesn't actually believe this, but there's a part of me that wants to believe that the Eagles have a lot more to this playbook that they just aren't putting on film because they knew they were going to get to the playoffs. They knew they were going to end up with a high seed, and they just want to have a lot of wrinkles to throw at the opposition. And that when the playoffs come, yes, they are going to look to limit turnovers, win the turnover battle, but they are going to get significantly more aggressive. I'm not sure that I believe that, but I understand some people who think that that might be in play. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of optimism, right? Because I talked at the beginning of the show about each of the teams and are they better? And is there a reason to believe things are going to get better? Nick Sirianni met with the media today. He talked about resting the starters and the rationale behind resting the starters. And I'll give you this. I think that it's pretty clear that the Eagles, when they've been on a short week this year, have not looked like the same team. This is a team that definitely has been battling issues on the offensive line. And like, yeah, you want the number 2 seed. And I still think the number 2 seed is in play. Like, I think the Eagles backups could still beat the Commanders. And then you still have to look at, can Detroit win their game to give the Eagles that number 2 seed? Can it happen? It might. But you can't guarantee that Detroit is going to win. So if you can't guarantee that Detroit's going to win, and you're looking at playing your guys in a healthier way by having them rest this week, or playing them this week, potentially open them up to injury. And don't forget what Dan Quinn said a few weeks ago. Oh, we're going to play them again in 2 weeks. Is there going to be some chippiness? Is there going to be some dirty play? I don't totally blame Nick Sirianni for not wanting to play the starters, but this is Nick Sirianni's rationale earlier today as to why he's not playing the starters on Sunday.
Yeah, I think I discussed that with you guys as far as just all the things that, I kind of take in hand. And, at the end of the day, I went with, it's not a guarantee that we can get the 2 seed, but I can guarantee we get, I can rest the starters, right? And so, just thought that was the best thing for our football team right there. Feel really good about the guys that are going to go in there and play. Obviously, you can't rest everybody. And so, we've had a good week of practice. We're going in there to try to win the game with some guys that haven't played a ton of snaps on offense and defense, but obviously have contributed. But just felt like that was the best thing for the football team, for this week moving forward.
I understand the logic that some people have, or the line of thinking that it's kind of a loser move not to start your starters when the number 2 seed is in play. But I think this Eagles team is still deep enough and good enough to win with their backups. And if it comes to fruition that Detroit loses anyway, I don't really have interest in opening up Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, Saquon Barkley up to actual injury. I don't want to open the door to this offensive line that's already beaten and battered to sustain more injuries. I don't want to see the secondary or the linebackers or the interior linemen, most notably Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. I don't want to see those guys run the risk of getting hurt or watching a Zach Bond go down with an injury in week 18. I don't need to see that. Okay. So I'm fine with it. I'm fine with the rationale. And in past years, I might've been a little bit perturbed by it, but I get it. If the Eagles controlled their own destiny, I would say this is a mistake. They don't control their own destiny. They have to win, and Detroit has to win. Now, if you're scoreboard watching and, Detroit is winning with 5 minutes left and the Eagles are getting their doors blown off, well, guess what? It's going to look like a mistake, right? If Detroit is up by 15 points with 2 minutes remaining and the Eagles are trailing by, 9, you're going to feel like it was a stupid Nick Sirianni decision because, well, look, Detroit wins the game and the Eagles, had they won, they would have. But I think that there is actually something this year with giving the starters the rest, if for no other reason than they need their offensive line to be healthy. This offensive line in the state that it was last week against Buffalo cannot go on an extended playoff run. The injuries to Cam Jurgens, to Landon Dickerson seem to be too much. And I don't know if that means Lane Johnson's going to play some snaps this week, right? Like Greg Bondarenko asks, is there a chance that Lane comes back for the playoffs? He was supposed to theoretically come back last week and it didn't happen. I don't think they're going to play him this week. I would assume that Lane Johnson is back for the playoffs. So give him another week of ramping up. Give him another week to get ready for the postseason, and that's fine. Hopefully with as healthy of an offensive line as you can have, this Eagles team goes to the playoffs and they run the gauntlet. Maybe they're going to have to run a gauntlet against the NFC West, but I think this team is good enough. This defense is sensational. This defense, I think, is the thing that can absolutely be the difference in a team that, has one playoff win versus a team that can make it to the Super Bowl. I think this defense is that good that it can almost single-handedly force this team into a Super Bowl again. I will tell you, there are things that I see out of each of those NFC West teams that make me a little bit hesitant, a little bit fearful. But then again, if you're scared, get a dog. I think the Eagles are going to be in good shape. Now, here's the thing that I actually wanted to show you as positivity. If you need a little bit of positivity before you go to bed tonight, or before your head hits the pillow, I want you to see what Jalen Hurts put on Instagram. Okay. Somebody put this together and put it on Twitter. I'm glad because there's always a weird thing when you try to screen share from Instagram. I want you to see really quickly the 4 images that Jalen Hurts put onto Instagram commemorating 2025. Okay. And then I just want you to think for a second, are any of them interesting? I'm going to show them to you and then we'll reconvene here in 15 seconds or so. I want these to sink in. All right. Here's the first picture. I'm even going to take the comments down. There we go. All right. 4 images Jalen Hurts shared for the 2025 season, right? For the year 2025. Here's the first one. Here's the second one. Here's the third one. Here's the fourth one. Okay. So fourth one, that says BJ Hurts. That's always enough. Love that. A little positive affirmation when he puts the cleats on. There's Jalen Hurts in a coat. Okay. I'm going to go back to that first one real quick. There's Jalen Hurts having himself a time. But this is the one. Second picture. Is he pictured with Dallas Goedert? No. Is he pictured with Devontae Smith or Saquon Barkley, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, Tyler Steen, Fred Johnson, Lane Johnson, Nick Sirianni, Kevin Patullo, Zach Bond, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Cooper DeJean, Reed Blankenship. Is he there with Jalix Hunt? Is he there with Nolan Smith or Nakobe Dean? Jahan Dotson? No. Grant Calcaterra? No. The picture that he shared, the only picture that he shared of him with another player is A.J. Brown. Now, these two have been on an up and down track, an up and down roller coaster over the last 2 years. And there were things that were aired out by Brandon Graham last year before the playoffs that certainly seemed to cause a little bit of controversy, where he said that they weren't as close as they once were. And there were moments earlier in this season where it felt like these two were out of sync. And then it felt like something changed where you started seeing A.J. Brown get a lot more involved in the offensive game plan. And we heard A.J. Brown in post-game scrums going to bat for Jalen Hurts by name, which he had not done for 10 plus weeks of this regular season. And it certainly seems like what we've seen on Hard Knocks, what we've seen on the sidelines, what we've seen in these games. And now Jalen Hurts on his Instagram, I'm starting to think some things might have been patched up. Some things might have been rectified between these two. And if you're going to go into the playoffs with an absolutely Super Bowl caliber defense, and now you've got your quarterback and number one wide receiver back in lockstep, it's going to be a real tough out in the playoffs. We will see what the Eagles look like this week as they play their backups against the Commanders. We'll see if they get that number 2 seed. We'll see if they get a little bit of help from Detroit. We'll see how the Flyers and the Sixers do. We'll see if the Phillies actually wake up and do something this weekend. And I'll come back and I'll talk to you all about it on Monday. Here on the Russ Joy Show, I will tell you, I may have locked down a time to do this show Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I don't want to commit to it fully, but I think I have found a time that will work. So I will talk to all of you on Monday. If you haven't done so already, like the video, share the video, subscribe, ring the bell to get notified whenever we go live with the show. If you like this show in the podcast feed, you can go find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcast. Leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, a 5-star rating and review over on Apple Podcasts, and I'll read it on the show. Until Monday, this has been the Russ Joy Show, and I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Have a fantastic Friday, a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on a marvelous Monday here on the Russ Joy Show.